Hey guys, Filthy here with my super short guide on the basics of Magic the Gathering. This is intended for people who are interested in getting into the game or watching the game but have no idea what's happening or no idea how to get started. So these are the very basics of Magic. Hope this helps. Enjoy. Very quickly, to make sure you guys are seeing the same thing that I'm seeing on my computer, just go to hit escape, go to gameplay, and make sure you have this series of checkboxes enabled, and that will make sure your display is exactly the same as my display. Let's start with the very basics. The win conditions in Magic are either to reduce your opponent's life total to 0, they start with 20, or to reduce their deck size to 0 and have them be forced to draw a card. Either of those conditions will win you the game. First, let's talk resources. So there's two real facets of this system that we need to address. First, cards. Each player starts with 7 cards. After the very first turn, each player draws 1 card at the beginning of their turn and only their turn. And then second, resources to cast cards. So we'll get into how to know which cards you can cast. We have to address lands. Lands are the resource system in Magic. Your opponent goes first, doesn't draw a card to start with. Our first turn, we draw a card. And then we have 2 cards that have no cost in the top right corner. So there are 0 cost spells, but they will be identifiable that way. The cards with no cost on them whatsoever are lands. Each player is allowed to put 1 land into play per turn, and this is the core portion of the resource system for Magic. Let's discuss Magic's resource system next. There's really 2 concepts we need to know to understand what cards are playable and which cards aren't. The first is the total cost of the card, and the second is the colored mana sources needed to play that card. The total cost of a card is really easy to figure out. You take all of the symbols on the top and add them together. Here we add 1 blue source, 1 red source, and 6 colorless sources for a combined total of 8. Here, 2 red sources, 3 colorless for a combined of 5. Here, 2 red sources, 1 colorless for a combined of 3. What this means is this card requires 8, this card requires 5, this card requires 3. The second requirement of casting a card is the colored sources match the cost of the card. Here, our lands, which are the resource system in Magic, provide a combined yield of 2 colorless mana and 1 red mana. This limits the spells that we can cast. Although Annex costs 3 and we have 3 mana, we do not have 2 red sources, so we're unable to resolve this spell. However, Howling Golem only requires 3 mana sources of any color. In this case, 2 colorless sources and 1 red source are enough combined resources to play this card, but not enough combined resources to play this card. Let's discuss the types of cards next. So there's 2 major categories of cards in Magic. These are permanents and non-permanents. Permanents, once you've paid their cost, tend to stick around and do something until they're dealt with. And non-permanents tend to have a one-time effect at the time that you cast them. Here, we chose to cast Howling Golem. Howling Golem's a creature. This creature stays on the battlefield until it's destroyed or removed, or the game ends. This card here, Fire Prophecy, is the other type of card, a non-permanent. And this does something when we play it. So here, this is a direct damage removal spell. We're going to remove this creature and pay the cost of the spell. It does its thing. The effect resolves. We do the rest of the text on the card. The creature, the permanent, is added to his graveyard as it's destroyed. The spell that we used is now spent in our graveyard and doesn't stay around because it's a non-permanent card. It's very easy to tell if a card is a permanent or not. It's just a matter of memorizing the categories. For non-permanents, you have sorceries and instants, both spells. And for permanents, you have artifacts, creatures, lands, enchantments, and planeswalkers. The card will always tell you can just look in the middle of the card. This one's sorcery, this one's creature, this one's creature, this one's instant, etc. Let's cover attacking and defending next. In Magic, a player declares the attacking creatures that they wish to attack with, and then the defending player chooses how those attacking creatures are dealt with. Let me explain a little bit more. So when I go to the combat phase of Magic, I choose which of my creatures, if any, I wish to attack with. In this case, I wish to attack with my Howling Golem. I tap that creature when I attack, which means it gets turned sideways, which means it will be unavailable as a blocker. And my opponent chooses here among how they wish to deal with this attacking threat. They can not block it, in which case all of the damage will go to their face, or they can choose to block it with any number of creatures that they wish to, starting with 1 and moving up as many as they'd like to put in front of it. Here, our opponent has chosen to block with all 3 creatures. This means that our creatures will face off. Our creature has 2 power and 3 toughness, so 2 offense and 3 defense essentially, and our opponent's creatures each are 1 power, 1 defense, combined for 3 power, 3 defense. So what this means for us is that our golem receives 3 damage and thus dies, and our golem deals 2 damage, 1 to each of these, so 2 of their 3 creatures will die. If they only had 2 in front of us, so just a combined power of 2/2, both their creatures would die. Our golem would be wounded 2 points till the end of the turn, whereupon it would heal up to its full 3 hit points. So when we resolve this, our golem will die, 2 of their creatures will die, and our permanent will leave the battlefield and head to the graveyard. The final thing I want to cover in this super basics guide for learning to play Magic the Gathering is what's called the stack. This is a fairly complicated concept in Magic, but the basic elements of it are pretty simple to understand. Essentially, it works like this. Our opponent has cast a spell. In this case, it happens to be an instant spell. This is a non-permanent type of thing. If it occurs, it will kill my creature, his shock will go to the graveyard, my token will disappear, and we'll move on. However, I have the option of responding to this by having my own instant speed response here. I have a spell that also can be cast at instant speed, which means it can be cast at any phase of the game. My opponent's turn, my turn, combat phase, doesn't matter, I can cast it then. So here, I will add my spell to the stack. Spells added to the stack or effects added to the stack just go on top of existing ones that are waiting to be resolved. This can go as deep as it wants. So if my opponent had yet another spell, it would go on top of my spell, and then you just resolve them top down. So because this stack is only 2 deep, my effect resolves first. In this case, I'm going to kill his token. Then his effect resolves, killing my token, and then gameplay proceeds as normal. Didn't matter so much in this particular example, but it allows for much more complicated interactions and allows for you or your opponent to interfere with the plays of your opposition during their turn, which makes for some interesting games. And finally, winning the game, we'll use the stack just to illustrate what's happening. So this creature has a instant speed ability that allows me to do 2 damage to any target for 4 mana, 3 colorless and a red source. So that activates it once. We'll target our opponent. We'll target just him. We'll do 2 damage. We'll submit. And then in response to our first ability, we'll do it again. Doesn't have to be in response. We could just do these one after the other. But for the sake of the stack, I just want to show you again. We can add another ability to the top here. Target him again. Submit with 2. Pay the price. And then we'll resolve the stack. The second activation will resolve first. I guess I could demonstrate that one more time by adding a third activation of it. This time we'll target just his creature. Pay for that. And then the stack will resolve top down. We targeted his face first, but that's the bottom element of that. The top element targets his guy, so it will kill his creature first. Then it will hit him twice in the face for 2 each time. And that results in the end of the game. All right, guys, hopefully this was pretty simple, pretty easy to understand and follow, and gets those of you who don't know what the hell is going on when I'm streaming Magic the Gathering to at least the basic point of being able to understand the major elements of the game.